Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our webinar today. We start our webinar, which is about CPR and DoPCs and effects on LCA and DPT International Program. I'm Tamar, a communications manager at Emperas, and I will introduce shortly information about our speakers and the agenda. The first speaker will be Luc Planke, who is the CEO and founder of Emperas. Emperas offers a lifecycle software for building materials and chemicals. Luc has over 16 years of working experience within the leading building materials industry. He has worked from cradle to cradle LCA and DPT certifications with over 100 manufacturing companies and with WITO, which is the Flemish Institute for Technological Research. He has established and created Emperas. So all in all, Emperas is a spin-off of WITO, and Luc has worked in various roles, started from product development, corporate social responsibility, business development, and research and development. Now I will introduce the second speaker. Our second speaker will be Sebastian Stiller, who is the CEO of EPD International Program. EPD International Program is the world's originator of the EPDs and the world's largest, most well-established and well-governed EPD program operators nowadays. Sebastian has extensive working experience with over 15 years of working experience in the sustainability field, bringing both corporate and consulting working experience from environmental services, energy and infrastructure, and manufacturing sectors. And he holds a Master of Business Administration in the Sustainability Management from Leuphana University. As for our agenda, today Luc will present eco-design topic, which includes three parts, started from introduction to general life cycle assessment, product environmental footprint single score, and use cases. And afterwards, Sebastian will take lead of international EPD system and overview, aligning EPDs with the construction products regulation requirements and implementation of CPR and DoPCs effects on LCA and the EPD International Program. So, Luc, floor is yours.
Thank you, Tamar. So, indeed, you already introduced Emperas. Just to say that, we have more than 100 customers, and we're mainly active in the building materials and the chemical industry. What we offer is basically in-depth knowledge on LCA and how to use it. Hence, we will start with an introduction of LCA and how we see it as an eco-design. But we really want to empower our customers to do the LCA themselves without becoming an LCA specialist, I would say, or without needing to deal with program guidelines and legislation on how to elaborate the LCA. So we set that up in what we call an LCA SaaS tool. And on top, of course, we go further and we elaborate the EPD roadmap and the LCA background report, as many of you know, and guide it through the verification. I think this is an important topic because what we see at the EPD Academy is that registrations are blowing up, and I have the impression a lot of EPDs are not getting verified at this moment. Not with Emperas, of course. Yeah. Just an introduction to LCA. I think this is a better looking car than the Ferrari that was launched yesterday, but that's another topic. Maybe the older people in the room know which car it is. It's the ODA2. It was launched in 1999, and it was launched as the most sustainable car because it was only consuming less than 3 liters per 100k. Back in the days, my parents were driving cars with 13, 14 liters per 100k. So this was a significant amount. They achieved it by streamlined design and by replacing steel with aluminum. And of course, this raised some questions at LCA specialists back in the day, and they calculated what the impact was on the aluminum replacing the steel. And they concluded that basically you needed to drive this car more than 450,000 K to have an environmental benefit from it. So unless you were a cab driver, you were probably not driving the most sustainable car at the time. So an LCA, we will consider the full life cycle of the product, so also the manufacturing, the use case, and the end of life. Most of you already know this, and so this is legislated in the ISO 14044 series. And then what we do is we work based on the EN 15804 plus A2, determining 19 impact categories. So for those that don't have any experience, we calculate more than just the carbon footprint, also water consumption, the hole in the ozone layer, and so forth. So how does it work? So we list all the life cycle stages, and then we go and measure all the flows, the masses and the emissions going out. And then we are going to link it with data records. At Amperas, we mainly work with EcoInvent. But preferably what we will do is we will ask for specific information that is registered in an EPD, and where Sebastian will tell us more about later on. Then we have all the flows inventorized, and then we will characterize them to come to the 19 impact categories and assess the environmental footprint of the product. So before 2019 seems like ages ago. I would say life was a bit simpler as an LCA specialist. In the end, we only had 7 impact categories, as all the eutrophication parameters were bundled into one. But as you see, there's also the ozone layer depletion, smog formation, and then, of course, a big topic today, the abiotic depletion of the fossil elements, or the minerals and metals. Since 2019, more impact categories were added, and this is because EN 15804, there was an alignment necessary with the PAF program at that time, and hence they did it. For us, as LCA specialists, we're really happy that, for instance, ionizing radiation was added, because indeed, if you only look at the product carbon footprint, you might come to the conclusion that nuclear power is the most environmental friendly one. But if you also consider the ionizing radiation, it's definitely windmills that are more environmental friendly. So this is just an explanation. I'm not going to go through this, but you can, upon request, we can share it with you. So what does our tool does? You can always book a demo, and then we will go through an apple cake, because everything what we do for our customers is, of course, confidential. But what we do is we list the ingredients and we match all the data records or with existing EPD, so you have a customized setup. And then in the end, you can consult what the environmental footprint is. Because of the big demands for the carbon footprint, we have a separate, I would say, graph on that. And here, for those that are not aware, you get familiar with the LCA alphabet. So the A1 is the raw materials. A2 is your supply chain towards your plant. A3 is what's happening in the plant, or in this case, the kitchen. And then for the end of life, I'm not gonna discuss a lot about it, what it's for a cake. That's other details. I would say in general, this is a very classical profile that we see for most of the products, where actually 75% of the impact or more is coming from the raw materials. You can drill down into the report and find out per impact category, what the contribution is of each life cycle stage, and then per life cycle stage, of course, what are the main contributors, and this is what you see in the graph on the right. And for those that have really good eyes, you can see that the blue one is the dominant factor. And this is, of course, the butter. It's a processed animal product that has quite a big footprint. What we offer in the tool as well is the single scoring mechanism. So for the general programs like the one from EPD International, we also make graphs of the PAF single score. Why do we do that? Because if we want to apply eco design, it is easy to do it with a single score, because often you have some burden shifting from one impact category to the other. If you have our tool running for the Dutch MKI calculations, of course, you have the MKI calculations with it. For those that are not familiar with the PAF single score, so it's an abstract score. It's expressed in millipoints. And why? Because each impact category is normalized to the average human being footprint on Earth of 2014. So meaning if you would have a result of 1 point, you have the annual footprint of one person on Earth. So that's quite drastic. So hence, with a single score, you can model, I would say, a vegan apple cake in the tool and figure out what your impact reduction is. So here we have a reduction of almost 15%. What else do we offer with the PAF single score? Well, we offer a double materiality check indicating what impact category contributes the most to your products. And hence, immediately we offer you the KPIs for your sustainability reporting. So here, for the cake, for instance, it's land use that is actually it's a bit bigger than even a climate change. Why? Okay, because there's a lot of agricultural products. But if you would miss that in your sustainability report, that I would say that would be a pity. And so it's an easy, I would say, scientific check of the double materiality on your environmental parameters. LCA, we apply it for quite a lot of things. I'm not going to go through all of them again. But of course, there's now the carbon border adjustment mechanism. You can get an indication through the LCA. They're talking about ETS2. Also from the LCA, you can estimate what the impact would be or how much the cost will increase based on potential energy price increase because of the ETS. Then, it's necessary to endorse a green claim if you position your product as such. And then later on, Sebastian will talk more about the fact on the EPDs and how it will integrate with the DoPCs. As many of you know, the EPBD directive is being implemented in all countries, requesting a building LCA and hence basically building material EPDs to make it before the building permission is granted. So some examples. All right, so this is a profile of a petrochemical or let's call it a plastic product. So what you see here is that there is a bit of a shift between the PAF single score and the global warming potential. But of course, as expected, the main bulk of the impact is allocated to the raw materials used. On the PAF single score, on the environmental footprint, it's very straightforward. It's actually two impact categories that are the dominant ones. It's the climate change and of course the resource use fossil, because it's fossils, it's oil being used as feedstock here. And as you can see, a lot of is still incinerated in the end of life at the C4 phase. Another example, for instance, is concrete. I think everyone is aware that there's a lot of cement in concrete, or there is cement in concrete, and hence almost the full, let's say, the biggest chunk of the environmental impact can be allocated to that. The environmental profile is a bit more complex here. So we have particulate matter emissions, ecotoxicity, fresh water, and the climate change, of course, as well. Here is the example of a ceramic brick product that is burned into a kiln at 1200 degrees. So here, logically, it is not the raw material supply that is the dominant one, but really the production or the kiln itself. So here you see on A3 that the production or the plant data is dominating the environmental impact. Here, I would say also a bit more diverse environmental footprint, where you have climate change, resource use, fossils, particulate matter, acidification, and ecotoxicity. Glass wool, so the product for building materials that is reducing our footprint, also has a footprint. And here, yeah, it's glass that is molten and spinned into wool. So also here, the factory is the dominant factor, or the dominant life cycle stage. The environmental profile is rather simple. It's almost only climate change here that makes this one up. So for us, every product has its own story to tell. It can be a dominant life cycle stage, and there's not a difference in the dominant life cycle stage, or I would say the dominant product or process to contribute to that, but also the most important impact categories shift around. It can be complex up to very simple, as for instance for the petrochemical products. But each time, I would say, a different footprint or a different fingerprint, call it as you want. So this is just an introduction. So if you want more information, you can reach out to me or myself or Tamar. You have our emails here, and we will be happy to give you a small demo of our LCA quadrant tool. We also organize in Antwerp, Belgium, our annual LCA community event. You can also find more information on that on our website or on our LinkedIn page. There's also some ebooks for you to download and consult. So now we go to the EPDs, or the environmental product declarations, and hence we are doing this webinar together with Sebastian. And basically, here you see the rise of the EPD. So this is a graph published by Jane Anderson. So in Europe, we're ramping up to 60,000 EPDs last year. Let's say Eco Platform expects that it's gonna go over 1 million by 2030. But okay, it seems that they're on the right end, or that their prediction is better than ours. We expected it a bit less, but nonetheless, it's growing rapidly. Why do we invite EPD International here? Well, basically because the biggest part is registered at EPD International. That's one thing. And secondly, for us, it's also one of our preferred programs, because it's really a smooth operation. The verifiers know what they're doing. The program guidelines are clear and stable, and this helps us processing LCAs and EPDs quicker than in other programs. So without further ado, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much,
Over to Sebastian.
Yes, let's see if I can share my screen, the correct one. You can see my screen now, right?
1 second. Yes, we can see your screen. Everything looks amazing.
Great. So first of all, thank you very much for the praise, Luke. I didn't expect that. I started blushing a little bit, but it's now also before we are now entering lunchtime for most of us. I went through the list quickly. I see friends and colleagues, but also new faces. But your apple cake actually gave me a craving, and I'm not going to give an example of an apple cake now, Luke, but I will try to be crisp and clear in my presentation as well. And the joke around the car that you also presented, the Audi A1, I think it was, right? The running gag in Germany was, es ist ein 3-Liter-Auto. So it's a 3-liter car. But in Germany, you mean with that the volume of the motor and not that it drives 3 liters on 100. So it was actually fun that you noted it here as well. But anyway, I have a presentation from me where, of course, we're talking about EPD and the transition to DoPC. By doing so, first of all, very quickly about myself. Sebastian Stiller, I was introduced already, but you have here also my contact details. The slides will be also shared with you later. So feel free also to reach out in case you need any more information. But in my presentation, I will quickly talk about who is the international EPD system, what an EPD is, and then why we need EPDs. Maybe not the million, maybe even more, Luke, I don't know. But we know that the EPD is becoming more and more integral part of legislation, not only in Europe, but also on a global scale. And then particularly focusing on the EU, how this EPD is then also transitioning into a declaration of performance and conformity. It's also great to have the craving for knowing more. We have now more than 100 participants here also listening in to what we are trying to convey to you. Yesterday, there was a big event also for the European Commission with 2,000 signups, but it's good that the craving is still there and going deeper on this information as well. So who are we? We are the international EPD system that is run by EPD International, which is a Swedish company. And we are the first and the longest established global program operator in the world. And it was founded in 1997 by the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. What we do, I would say we're quite niched in that sense. We provide a globally recognized system for developing EPDs. And we do this also with the support of a robust digital platform that we developed in-house. To support smooth registration, publication, and data. And I will also touch point a little bit on the journey that we're going through to make the EPD also a digitally accessible document. As a company, we're owned by a not-for-profit organization, so fully owned by an NPO. I'm also operating as a company on a not-for-profit status. We currently have more than 35 staff within the company, but we also have 13 international licensees, so representations. You can call them also commercial agents that are present on all continents. And my joke is always, except Antarctica, but let's make sure that the LC consultants can convince industry that we don't have to open an office in Antarctica because of the climate change effects. Yes, so we are also 9,000 certified, and I'm also can inform here that we are preparing with SWEDAC, which is the Swedish notified accreditation body, national accreditation body, to bring us to the CPR 2024 compliance under the AVS, the new validation system. We're one of the largest on the market, as you can see. We have currently more than 3,000 active clients with more than 21,000 active EPDs that are also ready for download for free via our portal. And we also upload them to Eco platform, at least the one for the construction materials industry. What is an EPD? I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I think the level of understanding is fairly high in this audience. But what I can say, it's an ISO, and our setup, it's an ISO-driven exercise, market-driven, and we follow different kinds of standards on different levels. So this is the pyramid that we typically show, where you can start with the organizational standards on how we operate the company or the program. Then we have the so-called LCA standards on the 1400 series. Then we have the specific one on EPD 1425, which has been revised, and we also were supporting the Swedish SIS on as a conveyor to release the update. It should have been out, I'm not sure, now in May to have the new version released. But now we have also so-called industry standards, or I would say also association that we are supporting, like Eco Platform, where we go for deep harmonization, where the standards are not specific enough. So here we enter the space where a program operator is also becoming a rule setter and defining the rules on how to conduct the LCA, how to verify an LCA, so that it become a comparable third-party verified document in the end. The more you reach the top, the more specific the rules and are in order to conduct an EPD that then also can be published in a system. An EPD in our system is also possible for any kind of product category. So we are not only on the construction materials. 85% of our EPDs are from construction materials, but we also have them for airplanes, for food, you just name it, and you can think it as crazy as you think. We also have them, for example, for the Italian market specifically on, for example, sanitary products. Just to rephrase what I just said, what is an EPD? Just to use the definition a little bit. It's a declaration, so it's not an eco-label. So we declare, we don't value if a product is greener or not. But it provides a standardized third-party verified lifecycle assessment data for products in various industries, and including in our case also services. And a lot of our clients use the EPD to then substantiate any kind of environmental claim that they connect to their EPD, to their product on the product level. It is, in that sense, a provider of transparent, objective information that you can use for comparison, including then global warming potential that we've seen in examples of Luc, for example. And it is also a reporting format that is critical to systemic actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that you can see, for example, in net zero strategies that are defined by companies, but also by national authorities. The EPD, also proud to mention, was also the initial footprint, I would say, of the work that was started under the European Commission, under the PEF, so the Product Environmental Footprint. And now also with the EN 1504, as a reference standard, also for the CPR 2024, which we'll talk about later, which is then the framework for the Declaration of Performance and Conformity. This is the process of how to conduct and actually to publish an EPD. I will not go into depth, but what you need is you need a cookbook, you need rules. That's the product category rule that we develop. So you can really think of it as a cookbook where you conduct the LCA assessment. Then it's compiled in a format, a digital one or a PDF. And then it goes through an independent third-party verification step. So the LCA consultant is always separated in the sense of the task from the actual verifier to have a truly third-party verified document. And once we have to go as EPD International, then we also do the registration, the publication, and dissemination of that information for our clients. Now, where we know have a little bit of an understanding for those that you are not so familiar with EPD, why do we need EPDs and the DoPC in the EU? I would like to start with a little bit setting the stage, and I think you've heard it a little bit also in the introduction from Luc. EPDs are also the foundation of decarbonizing the built environment, because we know that embodied carbon can make up to 40 to 50% of buildings of its total life cycle emissions. So we need tools here to actually report the impact. An EPD also can integrate with softwares like building information modeling. We know that it's not always that easy. You need to do an interpretation, for example, and transfer. But I think here also the digital solutions that we'll provide will make this a simpler task in the future. But you can use EPDs or EPDs increasingly when you're thinking about the design stage of a company, of a building, where you use an initial idea of how to set up a building. You're in an early design stage, and then you're moving to the as-built stage, where you want to replace generic information coming, for example, from an eco-invent data set to more specific information where possible on the material that you actually are using. So as that, an EPD operationalizes the decarbonization by converting this product level environmental data into actionable insights for reducing these embodied emissions. And as that, it actually is a prerequisite for achieving net carbon zero in the built environment. In that sense, an EPD is not just a reporting tool, but also used for decision making to make educated, well-founded decisions in what material you will eventually use in the final stage of your building. An EPD is also a facilitator of global trade. You can see in the map here on the right-hand side where life cycle thinking, life cycle management thinking, or life cycle assessments are voluntary, still require is a market-driven approach, where they're becoming mandatory, or where they actually are already mandatory by law. The latest input that I also received, for example, that we have now a new Circularity Act in, for example, Mexico, also specifically requiring EPDs, and increasingly also, as understood, in South Africa. So you can really see that legislators are embracing the life cycle methodology also to drive their own national targets and objectives on how to achieve net zero or carbon zero. An EPD, as that is useful because it enhances product competitiveness, because it of course also demonstrates for the manufacturer compliance, sustainability compliance with legislation. It provides a harmonized and standardized approach in the sense of reporting that information. As that it also simplifies cross-border trade, because an EPD in our system is also tuned to be globally accepted. We have few markets that don't accept EPDs because they have a monopoly in their own markets. For example, like France. There's also a similar situation in the Netherlands with a program operator that is, I would say, nationally owned. Otherwise, we see that our EPDs are globally accepted and also reputed documents. So they become a strategic asset actually to the company. And that's also important when I have the focus on the manufacturer, the owner of the EPD. So it's not EPD International that owns the data, it's the manufacturer, similar to the DoPC, because it helps them, of course, to gain market access in a global scale, but also in the US, EU market, US, you just name it. As long as we can set the rules so that they can comply with different kinds of regulations as a program operator, that then also the LC consultant and the verifier can respond to. And it's a very strong tool also for the differentiation of your products in the sense of when you have a green product or not, and you're going into public tender, as an example. Important, and I think this was also triggered by Luc with the statement 1 million data, 1 million data sets. Yes, this can no longer be done in PDFs. So we also have a solution that is scalable and has an open digital EPD ecosystem, as we call it. So in our system, we have a solution that is open and agnostic. So it doesn't limit you or as a program operator to operate with one specific software, like some of the other competing program operators are forcing you to make use of their own licensed software in the sense of one single shop, which we don't support. We like to keep the heads separated here. The portal itself is a marketplace where manufacturers and LC consultants bring the information together. And as such, this whole portal is highly scalable. It is API supported, so you can have a fully automated digitized data flow from your own software into our portal. For construction materials right now in particular, not all other product categories are included. And of course, we're working in that sense with an established ecosystem. So we also maintain the softwares that once they're connected, so they don't use outdated data sets, EcoInvent 3.6, for example, like some of our peers are still accepting. How it can look, but I will not touch on this one, but what I can say, the EPD compiler is a solution that we introduced for this fully automated digitized flow. It is digital by design. It supports increased quality and consistency because it takes the human error more and more out of the equation. And then as that, it's also future-proof. And it also can connect to voluntary DPPs because we talked about DPP, but there's a lot of voluntary DPPs already out in the market that are already collecting information from EPDs as we speak in our system, also possibly on an endpoint-to-endpoint solution when you're calling for information. But of course, also making the point that we're now waiting for the DPP requirements under the mandatory DPP under ESPR and the DoPC that then will be driven by the manufacturer and not so much by us as a program operator or a notified body. Yes, now when we have an idea about the EPD in our system, the CPR, So why CPR? CPR is the legal framework for the free movement of construction products within the European Union. And it has been quite a journey that this whole CPR has gone through, but actually it's a fact, it's valid. So the CPR 2024 is valid from 2026. We will see also later that there are short delays in the product families because they don't have the harmonized standard and this corresponding CPCR ready yet. But what it means in theory, more than 300,000 estimated companies are expected to deliver an XX, even X millions of LCA calculations that need to go into a DPC, DoPC, and then also being entered into the Declaration of Performance in the DPP itself. And I think here the legislator is doing a lot of work to set the framework, to set the rules. But the challenge, actually, what I can see is currently in the implementation phase. So we see that if it's how it will be currently is being proposed, it will be a very costly exercise. So we're also supporting simplification in our side on how we can make this actually implementable and feasible. Also thinking especially about SMEs. When we look at the framework itself, where does the CPR kick in? It is part of a interlinked ecosystem that we look at here. So first we have the ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, as you have also seen from Luc, which is a framework legislation, so catch them all. And then we have, under this one, we have a so-called sector-specific regulations. We have, for example, textile strategy, but we have in place already the construction products regulation for quite a while. But now in the CPR 2024, you're also asked to implement just the environmental information to that DOP, and then now we're calling it a DoPC. And the just is, I would say, where the devil is in the detail. But what it means is that in the CPR, the current EPD, as we know it, is becoming, more or less, it's not identical, more or less, a DoPC. And this is the harmonized zone, because here the European Commission, with a lot of experts, are now developing in verticals, the product families, the rules that we typically as a program operator were defining. Now it's the legislator defining this. And there's a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts on how we can improve and increase consistency in this field. So it's a lot of good things going on. And that means also that for you as a manufacturer, as an LCA consultant, you will be confronted with new rules. So the EPD will transition into DoPC, but it needs to follow other kind of specifications. For a program operator, where we now talk about this harmonized zone that we're adopting, also as a notified body, but also for the EPDs that are in the so-called non-harmonized zone. Because in the harmonized zone, it's the notified body that is typically accredited, will do the work. In the non-harmonized zone, you still have the validity of a program operator, but he or she then will also need to adopt and adjust to the legislative framework so that we can keep on comparing apples with apples and not apples with peers when you go back to the building level, for example. So the EPD is not becoming obsolete. It will increase importance, and I will also tell you in a minute why, also in the sense of transition phase that we will face. But important for you to understand is that the EPD, once it's in one of the product families that falls under the CPR, will need to be replaced eventually by DoPC starting 2027 throughout 2040. We expect to be fully up and running. And then for us as a program operator, as CPD International, but then also as a notified BenefCon, it's key that we do this alignment between the legislative framework and the voluntary framework that we're looking at. What does it mean? Transitioning, yes. As of today, except one under the old CPR 2011, there's no product family that is yet asking for mandatory reporting subject to the new CPCR that then is also then released once it's published in the regulation in the official journal of the European Union. And then you have a transition phase. So the whole mandatory reporting starts product family by product family after the revised harmonized standard, so the technical standard with the complementary CPCR. And I would say here in simple terms, the HEN, the harmonized European standard, is saying the what and the CPCR is the how you do your calculations. And then they also have specific transition periods that are defined in that citation as well, in that journal. So no big bang for EPDs, and they will continue to be valid throughout the transition period until the CPCR and the HAND standard are valid. We will start product family by product family. This will typically start in 2027. We're anticipating 26, but we have delays in the product families. So we'll see concrete and cement coming first, likely. And then we will have a ramp up, a bigger ramp up throughout 2030 to reach full coverage, as I mentioned earlier, in 2040. This is maybe in our own interest. I'm sharing this slide because EPD International is also developing its own notified body to support manufacturers throughout the transition period of for those clients that are affected by the CPR. So we're currently talking to SWEDAC here in Sweden, the national accreditation body, to be prepared when the first product families are coming to market. We're currently running lots of pilots with current existing clients because they need to train their teams. They need to set the processes in place so that they are prepared. And my recommendation always to manufacturers, do as many EPDs as you can now, because that means that you also will be prepared for the DoPC, because the routine is fairly similar, slightly different. But don't wait until you have to mandatorily report, because then if you're then starting to prepare, you will be too late. And the consequences of not complying with CPR 2024 are quite massive, because it could eventually mean that you are not be able to sell your product in the EU market. And I think to summarize very quickly, I think there's a misunderstanding that EPD is something voluntary. No, on the contrary, actually it's a strategic asset to the company. The EPD and the DoPC, I would also argue, benefits multiple stakeholders. It enhances market access, especially the EU market. It also supports regulators in policy enforcement, and of course it gives a harmonized reporting on environmental performance of products in the EU. We also support as EPD International regional growth and adoption because it is of course driven as a PPP, I would argue. It also supports collaboration. With EPD International, we also support LCA communities throughout the world in order to prepare through our licensees, for example. The notified bodies, it's not only us as EPD International, but there's also colleagues in the room here, I know, that are also will offer notified body services. So you will not be alone. There is a whole army ramping up to support manufacturers to make that transition possible. But important is that everything needs to happen in partnerships. So also we are very active working towards the European Commission. We are active in CEN. We're working very actively also in CIS, working in the ISO frameworks. We have provided input to the UNEP, to the GLAM methodology, etc., etc. So ultimately working on one method and not maybe one system, but at least one method, so that the market is becoming really, really, truly harmonized. But we're not there yet, and that's still a long way to go, I would argue. On that bombshell, I will now stop, and I will hand over to Tamara and Luc, and thank you for having me.
Herzlichen Dank for the amazing presentation, Sebastian. So we do have some questions that we have left around 10 minutes. I guess we can go through some questions to answer. And afterwards, if someone has more questions, you can now post questions in the Q&A section, or afterwards write to us via our contact emails. So in the Q&A, we have the different questions. I can read it. Like the first one is, or
I think I answered already. Started to answer on some of them, Tamara.
Yes, I see.
If it's the answer is insufficient, so please type it again. Well, Sebastian, there is the first question is maybe a more difficult one. It's more, I would say, an economical one on the cost for third world countries.
But I can respond to Siddharth if you want to. Yes, so Siddharth, we are currently operating, of course, when you say, I don't use the term third world countries, but I would say developing countries in that sense. But I mean, we don't have a specific partner here. Where we have partners, licensees represented, they can set their own pricing strategy. But of course, you can always reach out to us, also to the Secretariat in Sweden, to see what's possible. But what we do practice on a global scale, where we have licensees represented in the market, they also will adjust their pricing to local, I would say local, I don't know the exact word for that, but adjust to the capacity of the country in that sense.
All right. Yeah, the next one is also for you, I guess. Is
Yes.
EPD International planning to publish future DPPs?
So if you're talking about the mandatory one under the European Commission, this is not up to us. This is the DPP is managed by the manufacturer. What we can do, of course, we can support the manufacturers by providing the data in a as flexible format so that they can easily add it to the DPP. So we don't have a DPP solution. We don't plan to have one, not as a notified body, and currently also not as an EPD international system. So we're not working on a DPP solution. So we publish EPDs, which are then typically transferred downstream by other actors and made become an integral part of a DPP.
Yeah, the next one is a much more difficult one. I think it's probably from an LCA consultant. And it's about, he's referring to the situation in Holland, making eco-event mandatory. So from my part, yeah, I can answer on that. We did recent studies, for instance, for ArcelorMittal, where we made the models based on eco-event and on Gabi data. And in the end, the differences were really marginal. Sometimes I would say on ecotoxicity things, there can be minor differences, but on overall, I would say the result or the difference was less than 1%. So for us, that was really, I would say, spot on. Also, what we know is that there is not going to be a European background database. They're always going to make references to either Gabi or to EcoInvent, but I think the European Commission is a bit stuck on that promise on what to do now and what can they share. And I think they're already since years in that limbo. I would say since 2019. And from my part, I don't see anything moving there, but maybe Sebastian has a different view.
Yeah, maybe I can give you an input here, because I mean, this is a very hot debated topic also in the CPR group where we're discussing this. So I know there's an activity going on led by OpenLCA, I think, the guys from Green Delta, who gotten the task to develop generic data sets. Not too many, but they have a task now to develop this and make this available free to all. So there is an activity going on where the European Commission is trying to establish such a generic data set, but on a limited, I would say on a limited number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And also maybe just from my point of view, I'm already running LCAs and EPDs since before the EN 15804 plus A1 was demonstrated. And of course, even if you go back five years, we really needed to rely a lot on the databases. But today we really find more and more environmental product declarations of ingredients. Why is this? Because basically, in essence, we work first for the products that have a green positioning, and basically they are using green ingredients, and they also need a CPD to justify that. So I think give it another 5 years, and I think this will not be such a big debate as it was 10 years ago, because then it was really high. As for the Netherlands, I think the Netherlands, they really, it's their own thing. Yeah. For me, yeah, well, I would say if it comes to environmental footprint declarations, they're not that European, because indeed you're right, it needs to be EcoInvent, and it needs to be even a specific version of EcoInvent. Now with their updated version, it's EcoEvent 3.9. We're already looking forward to EcoEvent 3.12. So it's problematic, and what's more problematic is they do not accept EPDs of ingredients that are allowed. So basically, they're undermining the project somehow. Yeah. But I'm sure this is not the answer anyone wants to hear here. Yeah, technical guidelines on the DoPCs. Well, I think there's a general framework defining the basic work requirements that need to be declared. And then further on, you need to look to your CPR. I think it's really important for the CPR that you keep a close watch on it, because basically it's going to set the framework how your products are going to be declared. So it might be, for instance, that even there, that they will set, for instance, specific production waste at a fixed rate. So it's, I would say, really crucial or important that you follow up on that. And I would advise to prepare with an LCA. We do it for many of our customers so that they can steer it also for them into the right direction. I would say if you're not engaged there, you risk to lose the battle already now when they're writing the rules. Okay. Do you plan to support the transition from current CPCRs to the harmonized standards? Yeah.
I think that one is to me.
Yes.
Yes. So, Luca, I can say currently we of course already adopt the harmonized European standards in EPD International as a CPCR. So I would say here we're not deviating too much, but we know that they're now developing also new and updating some of these harmonized European standards, and there will be then of course complementary rules, like I said, on how to do this via the CPCR that are also being developed. So yes, as a program operator, you cannot do too much consulting because you need to remain impartial. So you also always will need an independent, someone independent from the notified body working with you on that transition. But of course, we are trying to harmonize and align where we can as much as we can to also make that transition as simple and painless as possible. And I think that goes into another question, Luke, that was also connected to it, that in our system, we also increasingly refer to harmonized standards in the sense of that we refer to that standard. Yes, that's true, because it's IP protected, it's IP, so intellectual property rights on those standards. So we can't freely share or adopt that information and publish it then without the acceptance of EN, of SEN. So it's a fact that we need to deal with. And we want to be clean. We don't want to infringe on IP.
I support Callum's remark, because also for the LCA consultant, it's the same. Share the same burden on that.
We're aware of the issue, but we don't have the solution to make this information freely available to the market, because, like I said, it's an IP protected document.
So here, the DoPC, will it be specific or covering similar products for manufacturing portfolio? What will be the level of granularity? So for that, I would refer to the EN standard 15941 that defines, to what level you can group products. So, Kevin, this is already standardized, and at Temperas we use it, but I don't think it's that well introduced on the market yet, but okay. Growth. At Sebastian, by becoming a notified body, how EPD International would rely on its current accredited verified.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's also anonymous, I see. Yeah, I mean, we need to acknowledge the fact that the real bottleneck in the implementation of this is actually the scarcity of verifiers who are really competent and understand EN 1504 and regulation. So the bottleneck is not the regulator, it's actually the verifier, I would argue, the small pool. So from currently not being involved as EPD International, not guiding, we guide, of course, we control validation verification, but we don't execute verification. That's with the verifier. In the notified body, we would need to contract or subcontract the verifier, and then the verifier would work under the umbrella of the notified body in very simple terms. So we, as a notified body, we are responsible then for the certificate and the validation verification work. So we would subcontract the verifier for that work in very simple terms. So if you're interested, please reach out to me, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous.
All right, and we have another anonymous, and of course, I think it's really directed to me, as I mentioned, carbon border adjustment mechanism. You always get a question of me. So indeed, an LCA, it's I would say it's not going to cover a carbon border, a declaration for the carbon border adjustment mechanism, because there you need to go on site to register the measurements, and indeed you require other ISO compliances. But what it does do, for instance, is it will measure, what the carbon footprint is of your goods export. And basically, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, it's going to align with the ETS. So that you will pay 75 euros to import it. So just to give you an idea, we work for an aluminium producer. And just to give you an idea, 1 kilo of aluminium, an extruded profile, it costs around 3.5 euros. And if they import from outside of Europe, they will have a price increase of 70 cents just to import it, based on 75 euros per carbon for CO2 equivalents that they have in their value chain. So then it becomes more like a business case risk assessment that you can do with an LCA rather than just determine your environmental footprint. So DPP won't be a third-party verified document. Well, in my opinion, I don't think it is, but the EPD feeding it will be, or needs to be. And then from Sebastian, it's again on the notified body. For the environmental requirements must be the same than the other requirements in the harmonized standard. No, absolutely not, because an EPD program is not a fire lab, so or an acoustic lab or whatever. So they stay in their own domain. The AV3 plus process, maybe that's a webinar on its own, Kevin, I would say.
I agree with you, Luc. That's a complicated one. And I think here we're all pushing for what then initial site inspection means. But currently, yes, it would require an official first initial inspection on site. But I know that there's a lot of lobbying or collective action, in positive words, is also on its way here to make this actually more acceptable, for example, via remote. But that's an open discussion. And currently, yes, it would require, I would argue, site inspection, initial site inspection on site. But we also, I would say, testing the limits of the borders of that specific regulation. But it is what it is right now.
If it will be mandatory, for sure, we won't be able to deliver 1 million EPDs in 5 years.
No, it needs to be implementable. Like I said, that was my initial comment as well, and cost efficient. So this is not really supporting LCA validation. But anyway, that's my personal opinion. So.
Okay, somebody's asking for your contact ID, Sebastian.
Yes, it will be in the slide that will be shared. There's more questions on the slides will be shared. So yeah.
Yeah, and so if you have any questions on slides not being received or whatever, or please reach out to Tamar, tamar@mperas.com. The database developed by OpenLCA, will it be mandatory? I think they're just exploring the possibility. So And I think a generic database is never mandatory. I think if you can replace it with specific data, it's going to be better, except for the case in Holland, as we discussed. Timeline for this transaction? Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's the reference to the different product families.
Yeah.
I can recommend there is a document, official communication from the European Commission, where you will have a good overview of all the product families that are affected, the 36, and when we can anticipate. There is one slide that I shared in very rough terms when we can accept the standards, and then the transition period when you need to report. It's in my slide deck that I shared earlier. But official communication from the European Commission, of course, is key here to observe that for the product families that affect your product portfolio.
Yeah, and then I think we have a last question. It's a good one to end this webinar with the bomb. How can we scale the EPD process? As we know, getting it done takes 6 months. Well, we have to be really honest. This is one of the reasons why we like to work with EPD International, because even from the traditional, I would say, non-digitalized solutions, we managed to wrap it up within 2 months often. So that's already one thing. And for the rest, I think everybody's looking to scale this up, to digitize this further. But yeah, I think the further we go into the EPD scaling up, the more we will lose control on the background data and the interpretation of the data and the eco design. So it's gonna be a choice we also at Amperas need to make. For Sebastian, I think it's an easy one. All right. Also, Sebastian, thanks for joining us. And
thank you, Luca, Tamar, for having me.
Thank you very much to Sebastian and Luca for the amazing presentations, and to every participant who joined us today for your questions and involvement. So if you have any questions or need slides and recording, please contact me in my email address that was visible, and I will send to everyone presentations and recording, as well as I will cover your questions. And thank you very much, and I wish you everyone good lunch or dinner from where you are now in different time zones.